Hello, Podfam, and welcome to another episode of the Tea with Laura and Rachel. Today, we have a very special returning guest. She is the founder of the Empowered Woman Rises. Welcome back to the show, Preeti. What are you drinking with us tonight?
Hey fam,
Hey,
thanks for having me here.
we're so excited you're back.
I'm so excited to be here. I had a glass of wine earlier, so right now I'm on water, so
You
I, I
should have
can
told
balance
us. We
it.
would have brought wine.
At the end of the day, it's like I need that.
Yeah, well, you know what? I will admit, before I was drinking tea, I had a little cooler, what we call a gin smash. So don't worry, I'm kind of like on your level.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am
All
also
right,
now drinking
we're
tea.
vibing now. Okay.
We're vibing.
I feel a little left out, but it's all right. It's all right. I'm okay. I'm
We need to
okay.
plan better next time.
Yes, yeah, I've got a core. Are we going alcoholic or are we staying, on the tea?
Yeah.
Definitely.
So it's funny. A while ago, I came across this thing where the Persians, I don't know if they still do it, but at least in the olden times, any decision they made, they would make it sober and then they would make it drunk. And so, it's interesting because it puts you in a different state of mind, right? It's that like cold state of mind versus a hot state of mind. And I just think that when you're drinking, different conversations come out, different thoughts come out. So it's definitely good fuel for
Mm-hmm.
talking. So yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
would suggest trying it. I remember your Taylor Swift episode, and I think you guys were drinking with that, and I could tell it was great because it was just like,
Definitely
I
one of
love
them.
this.
I think definitely your favorite episode of the disaster dates. We were like on one or two drinks in that one. So yeah, we love
It
episodes
was
where we get
fun.
a little tipsy.
It was fun. Yeah, I could tell you were just like, F this,
Yeah.
and actually, I can curse on this podcast. So, yes.
Don't worry, that's why we have the E rating. It's all good.
And
Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes you just have to bring that energy to the topic because it's just like so outrageous. But what are you having to drink, Laura?
I am drinking a peppermint tea.
Oh my God, so am I.
Oh, see, I had a feeling you would, so I brought it along as well.
Aw,
so sweet.
This is
I
the
love it.
first time we've like ever matched when we're not sitting together. It's
that's
great.
true. That's true. Well, I'm glad that we are matching tonight. It makes me feel connected. We have been so excited about this episode, pretty much counting down the days, one, so we can see you again, but also just we want to hear your thoughts on this because, we both grew up, like, we're born and raised in Canada. We've had that common Canadian growing up experience. And, this was prompted by an episode that you recently did on your show, The Empowered Woman Rises, about your experience with moving out on your own. Because, you've moved around a lot when you were growing up in so many different places. So, why don't we start there and you just tell us your story from like childhood to where you are now?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I know before this call, we were talking about doing a monthly connect, and I'm so excited for that.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So, my story. So, I was actually born in Geneva,
Oh, okay.
and my dad's job took us to a few cool places, Yemen and Denmark and Iran and India. And every place I went to was such an mind-opening experience. Experiencing different cultures firsthand, the perspective that it brings to you, to your life, the way you see the world, the way you see people is so incredible because you get to see people for who they are and not what the media we consume portrays them to be. Because, if you were to believe what you see, all Iranian people are evil. But the truth is, Iranian people are some of the most like welcoming and hospitable people, Persians and the government. At the end of the day, like all of the stuff we see, it's government, right? Like even the recent Russia thing, right? Like when you get down to it and when you see the stories of the soldiers that are going, like they're 18, they don't want to be there. They're afraid. Their parents are scared, but it's the government. So
Right.
I was just really grateful to have that experience. And as part of that, we came to the United States. And it's funny because the way, my dad was a diplomat, so he's an ex-diplomat and he's a consultant now, but he got like you got to pick certain stations. So you got to pick like a station, but then the next station had to be like a B or C, something like that. So you got to switch it up. So this time around it was the A station. And I remember we had a choice of going to Canada or the US, and my mom prayed on it because she was just like, I don't know. Like both of these are great places. Like, she wanted to make sure we had great opportunities for education. Both my parents did. And she prayed on it and she picked a little ticket and it said America. And so that's kind of how we ended up here.
We could have been neighbors.
I know. How old were you when you moved to the States?
Oh God, you're gonna make me tell my age. Let's see. It was 2004 and I am 33 now. Well, I'll be 33 in a month. So you do the math.
I'm not good at quick mental
15,
math. 15?
something like that.
Okay, so you were in high
14,
school.
15. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
you
was
would.
definitely
Yeah,
in high
I think
school.
that's about it because I would have been 12 in 2004. So yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
I know people ask me my age now and I'm like, I don't know.
I know,
It's
right?
so 30
You
plus
hit 30
something.
and you're like, I'm 30. Like,
Yeah.
just in my 30s.
Yep. So you came in when you were in kind of high school age. So let's start with talking about school. And with your schooling, what was the expectation that you would say you grew up with?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple, oh my gosh, there's so many factors here. But I think one of the things is my parents stressed education a lot. And I truly believe one of the reasons that is we were middle class. So education is what would help us secure a life for ourselves and, give us opportunities to build a successful life. But I think, more than that, what influenced that was my mom. She told me once that when she arranged married to my dad and they started looking for a relationship for her. And I think she was 20, she was 19, 20 when she got married. And she was actually doing her bachelor's at that time. And my grandfather was like, oh, now you're getting married. Like, you don't have to continue your studies. And I think she was heartbroken. And my dad was like, no, I want her to continue. I want her to finish her studies before we get married. And I am really grateful he did because it ended up actually helping her get a job here in the States. And that job is actually my first job out of college. And it's actually where I met my husband and stuff like that. So, like, if you looked at the chain of events, it's kind of wild how that works out. But they really stressed education, which is cool. My mom never asked me to cook. She was like, just study. Don't worry about anything, just study. With that, though, came a lot of pressure.
Right.
Um, you know, why aren't you getting like 100 out of 100?
Yeah, you got a 98. What happened to the other 2%?
Yeah. And in India, the competition is really tough, right? We have a huge population. So the competition is like you could, with, a 0.1 of a difference in a percentage, you could lose a seat in a college.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of like psychological effects that has. And it came out for us. Like it was, you know, we studied day and night. Like I remember I'd go to bed very late and then I'd get up and I would study like 3 hours before the exam too, because it also then got tied to how I thought my parents cared for me. So if I did well, I got praised.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of becomes this like unhealthy cycle of validation seeking.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you get into that cycle, then later in your life, you're going to be, people pleasers. So that's a whole another thing. But it was expected of us to study and to do well. And I am absolutely grateful for it. I just wish the pressure wasn't as much, but I understand where they were coming from. You know, they wanted us to do well and they were living in the society they were in. And we didn't know that we were going to be in America, like we don't know what selection of stations we get. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into that.
Yeah, and then Preeti, I'm just kind of thinking off what you're saying here. Once you moved to America, did the pressure change at all, or did you feel different in American school than your previous school? Like how was that transition for you? Was it still that same expectation because it was coming from your household that like okay, maybe you're in a place now that doesn't like, okay, values grades, but it doesn't come from a more cultural, it's more from like an internal pressure I find with kids in America. Like we create the pressure on
Hmm.
ourselves versus like the external. So did you notice a shift in that at all?
No. I was definitely still expected to do well. A B was not acceptable. A C wasn't acceptable. We moved away from the Indian ranking system in classes. So, like, you had people were first, second, third grade or rank in the
And
class.
this was like public?
Yeah.
Wow.
Ooh.
And
Because that just I don't know, maybe there are some schools out there in North America that do that, but
oh,
in a
no,
in a
this was,
regular public school, like you would not have all
yeah.
your students
Oh,
ranked.
sorry. This was in India. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Sorry, I'm just comparing.
Oh, comparing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to like a North American school. It's always just like, oh,
No, it
don't
was
talk
public.
about
It
your
was
grades, right? Like,
people would get into like the teacher's faces about like, I don't think you scored, you graded her paper well enough and like she should definitely get more points. And I would my parents would look at my mark sheet and like send me back and be like, no, you should advocate, you should have gotten more points again, because the competition is so tough.
yeah.
Hmm.
And but like the pressure on kids is really, really bad. There's a movie called Three Idiots. It's actually a really funny movie. It's a great movie that kind of gives a glimpse into the Indian education system if you have a chance.
Hmm.
Highly recommend. It's like one of my favorite movies. And it's definitely something like I've shown it to my husband and he's enjoyed it too. So um the expectation didn't change. Also because even schools here, universities are looking at your GPAs. They're looking at extracurricular. And in fact, I think I found the pressure to be greater here because not only now I had to do my schoolwork, but then I also had to be a well-rounded person.
Hmm.
So I had to be doing extra stuff and that was hard. It was hard, like a mental shift also to be like, okay, now I need to be doing this because I didn't grow up with that expectation. But it was also hard to balance, okay, I'm new in the country. I want to try to like fit in the society here and I want to do well because, yes, my parents want me to do well, but I also want to do well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then there's this thing about, okay, well, if I want to stay here, because that conversation started coming too. My dad's posting is 3 years.
Hmm.
So at the end of 3 years, what would happen? And if I wanted to stay here, well, then I needed to do well so I could go to school here so I could,
Hmm.
all things like that.
Hmm.
So I think in fact it increased because my parents are now thinking about, okay, if you're going to stay here, if we're going to be spending, because I would be an international student.
Yeah. So
And so, yeah,
the rate, like the cost of university when you're an international student is like 10 times
yeah,
that of
right.
a domestic student.
And so they're doing all this cost benefit analysis. I mean, I don't blame them. I really don't. I just wish it was a little easier.
Yeah.
Um, but there's things that they did that set us up for success in our life now,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't do the same things with my kids.
Yeah, and just as you were kind of talking about now, you had to be that well-rounded student because, as you were saying, it was all about the academics. And I was thinking of the um, equivalent in North America, and I almost want to put it on like the extracurriculars, especially the athletics. Rachel and I both kind of grew up in competitive athletic worlds, And we saw parents like that's where they put the pressure
Hmm.
on their children. So I found it so interesting that, like, yes, there are parents that will always have pressure on academics.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We're almost like reversed, where it's like you need to be in music, you need to play soccer, you need to do ballet, you
Yeah.
need to do this tennis, everything,
Yeah.
instead of that main focus. So either way, like in either society,
Yeah.
kids are being put through all this mental strain,
Hmm.
and it doesn't leave room for kids to be kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
where was your play? Where was just your
Yeah.
hanging out with friends, right?
Yeah. SATs, like all of
Yeah.
those things. And it's interesting because when I was younger, I remember watching American movies like my dad would, and I'd watch along with him. And like, you see kids on their bikes and like,
Hmm.
just, oh, we're going to go to the mall. We're just going to hang out and all. And like, I had this picture in my mind of what kids would do. And yeah, some of that happened. But what I also saw here, because I lived with my cousin briefly, like, kids here, even high school, like even middle school, and kids are
Hmm.
working until like 7, 8 o'clock at night. I don't agree with that. Like to your
Hmm.
point, when do you just get to be?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's like that. We're all rushing to grow up, right? But like, nope, don't
Yeah.
rush. Don't rush to grow up.
Just teaching really great work-life balance skills right from elementary school.
Right. You're teaching that there's stuff that you're going to have to do once that day shift is over to
Hmm.
Hmm.
be a productive member of society.
Yeah. And I know Rachel and I, we've talked about this before in our absolute hate for side hustles,
Yes.
because it's like that expectation, and it's come up with this millennial generation. And I think it's kind of revealing itself that, like, we were so scheduled, you know, children,
Overstimulated.
and then we're like, oh, now we work, we got to be doing something else too, so let's get another job, right? Like, it's kind of funny, we always feel this need to
It's
be busy.
interesting because, like, it's funny, like, you guys know I started this business last year.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I honestly thought about, so you go through school, right? And then you graduate and then you're working. Well, with work, more likely you are going to have your weekends free,
Right.
Hmm.
hopefully. And if I had started working on my business then, it would have been in like a completely different place because I didn't have kids then. I was like, I had a boyfriend, but
Hmm.
um, I had so much more time that I
Yeah.
could have invested in it. Um, it wouldn't be what it is today, even though like I was, vulnerable with you guys earlier and saying like I'm not really making any money right now, but it wouldn't be that quality.
Hmm.
But you know, with the time, maybe it could have been something different. So that's kind of what I look at and the balance I look at. Um, Side hustles is an interesting concept too, because I don't think any of us want to work till we die.
No.
And
No.
so while we have the energy, if we, we're like, hey, I make extra money, I can invest this and keep
Hmm.
it growing. And
Hmm.
this means I can retire at 35, go for it. If you need to like work 2 jobs and that's what your dream is, and you can, you have a plan and you can build it out, go for it. Because the energy you have when you're younger, oh my God, there's no match for it. Like right now, I'm just like, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. I'm so tired. So there's pros and cons,
Oh,
to
absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
doing it. So it's interesting. At least this culture, I think, gives you the opportunity to have that. Um, I think in India, because a lot of it, and it's slowly changing, but because a lot of it is very still academic, you
Hmm.
do one thing and you are that one thing, and then you do well with that one thing,
Okay.
especially if you're middle class. If you're, upper class, if you're rich, well, then you have your pursuits and your hobbies, and maybe
Yeah.
you're making money through some of them. So it's like not even a thing that you can really think of. With the advent of social media, it's changing. Like you have a lot of people who are online doing different things, but even those people, if you looked at it, they are something. Like there's this guy who's like a reporter for, a good like TV channel, and he has sort of like a comedy page, but he still has that backing of this
Mhm.
prestigious job because that's how society looks at you, you know.
Right.
Um so even the fact that it's available, it's an opportunity that's available to you to do a side hustle. It's interesting. It's a different culture here that allows it, which is cool.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And then, as you're just kind of saying, you're exhausted a lot of the time because you do have two young children.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the expectations around school, what are those conversations that you're having with them? And, what would you kind of say to them? This is what I hope for you?
Yeah. I My perspective has changed a lot in the last few years because I used to be like, oh, I wish I could just do anything, and I wish I didn't have to work, or I wish I could pursue like the thing I want to do, and I wish I didn't have to go to school for it. And there've been successful people, right? Like college dropouts who
Yep.
really successful. The thing that I find is that our society expects you to have a bachelor's degree, for
Hmm.
example, to get a, a decent paying job.
Like that's the new high school degree, right? A
Hmm.
Exactly.
bachelor's.
And, my thing for my kids will be I will support you no matter what. Have a fallback plan. What is your
Mhm.
fallback plan if the thing you don't want to do doesn't work, or if the thing you want to do doesn't work out? Because, like, even athletes, you could get injured. And then what
Yep.
do you do?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Um, so if that's going to trade school, okay, that's great. If that's pursuing some sort of other education that you can, at the end of the day, show and get paid for and have a roof over your head and have food on your table and you can clothe yourself, that's great. But in our society right now, like even, I look at so many jobs, bachelor's degree required,
Hmm.
because there's a certain expectation of if you've gone through school and if you've gotten it, there's certain set of skills you have. And how do you show those skills? Otherwise, you have experience. But at that entry level stage, when you're trying to start to make money on your own, you know, not going to have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So either you can work a lot to get that experience, or you can get a 4-year degree and at least enter the workforce and then, start to do it. So if it was today's world, I would say do what you want. I would still recommend you get a degree so you have a
Mhm.
fallback plan and
Hmm.
you can make a life for yourself.
Yeah, my thoughts are very similar to yours, Preeti. And for me, I'm like, you can pick university, college. You want to do online courses that is a specific skill. You want to go into trades. I don't care. You know, like you said, have that fallback plan and pursue what you love, right? Like, this is something that maybe you heard the same message around graduating high school, but our generation was not pushed towards trades
Hmm.
and more applied college studies. We were all funneled into the university system. And for today's day and age, with so many people going through there, it's people I know who went for the trades and went to the applied college. They're all doing fantastic, right? So I think it's great if we don't like limit ourselves to like you have to go to Harvard, right? Like Harvard is the only option where
Yeah.
there's so many different paths for people to take. And like you said, you have your education, no one can take that from you.
Yep.
You now have the skills, and just go do whatever is going to make
Yeah.
you happy and help you provide for yourself.
Yeah. And if that's going to Harvard, do it.
Oh yeah, if
Right?
that's
Like,
Harvard, if Harvard's going to get you, go for Harvard. But
and because I think for you and I, it was probably our parents had this idea of prestige and like,
Yes.
yes, my kid goes to
The
Harvard
Ivy
and,
League,
you
right? Like
know?
even Canada has a list of Ivy League schools that are the, preferred
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
degrees.
The top universities.
Yeah. Because that was their generation.
Yes.
That's how you showed success,
Mhm.
was that
Mhm.
your kid, did well.
Yeah.
And I think that narrative is changing. I think we're seeing success in, what is your kid accomplishing and contributing to society versus what
Mhm.
school are they going to,
Yes.
which
Mhm.
is an amazing shift because, I mean, that's the other thing. Like Ivy Leagues are a whole another set of pressure, you know? And I just don't believe in that. Like, you don't need to go to an Ivy League to have a good life. You don't
No.
need to kill yourself
Mhm.
to to be happy and be fulfilled. And I think our generation's changing that narrative from I need to make money to I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel like I'm making a difference. And with that, the conversation shifts of what am I studying? What am I doing? Where am I working? And so like I want to work for a company that makes a difference
Hmm.
in the world, And that change is just so beautiful to see.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely share those same thoughts. And I think in a similar vein there, just normalizing kids not going to school for a few years
Yeah.
after they graduate high school would
Oh,
be
gap
just such a
year.
wonderful thing to
Yeah.
see. Because it's like, I think back to when I went to school, I was fresh out of high school. I turned 18 in university. Like I had already started. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
I like maybe just recently kind of figured out a path I wanted to do a year ago,
Yeah.
and I'm 25. So I wish that I hope to see, and I think it is starting to happen, just that normalization of if you want to take a year off to go travel, go do that. If you want to take 2 or 3 and you want to try different jobs, or maybe try to find some internships or meet some interesting people in different career
Yeah.
paths, that's great because it helps those kids formulate their thoughts of what they actually want to do
Yeah.
and how they want to contribute to the world, as
Mhm.
opposed to, okay, choose your career path and go into thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. When just
Hopefully
last
you like
week,
it.
hopefully you like it. And just last week, you had to ask to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And it's interesting because at one point I had finished university and I was gonna do an MBA because again, like it was one of those things where if you did an MBA, it's like so cool. And my counselor actually said, you should go and work for a few years before
Yeah.
you do an MBA. And I was
Mhm.
really grateful for that perspective because otherwise it's just like, it's all theoretical. Like you don't necessarily know how it applies. And honestly, you can't contribute, which makes the classes really boring because
Mhm.
it's all theory. In theory, yes, it should work that way, but it doesn't.
Mhm.
And how do you take the knowledge that you're learning and apply it in your daily life? Well, if you're not working, an MBA doesn't benefit you a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
and so many people in the MBA programs, like they did go work for a year or two,
yeah,
and when the lucky ones, it's actually their employer that's sending them
Mhm.
to get their masters and their MBAs, and
exactly.
you know what's better than a free ride
Yeah, yeah,
for for higher education.
Yeah, and a lot of schools won't even let you apply
hmm
until you've hit that 3 years of working experience mark post secondary.
yeah, yeah. I think, I think our generation is starting to separate like what we want from what we're gonna ask our kids to do with where like our parents again like society like what's expected of them it shows up in what they expect of us
Mhm.
and it showed up in go to prestigious schools and shine the family name.
Be a legacy, right? Legacy student at Ivy League school.
Yeah, when
Mhm.
India like it literally increases your value because oh my kid went here so when you're doing arrange when you're setting up relationships and things like that like that's a thing people put on their biodata is what we call it and went here, did this master's and did that master's. Or, it's funny because some wedding cards, like if you, it's so funny. And some wedding cards will list that the groom or the bride studied in the United States and like they did MBA in this college in the United States. Like that's a thing, there's a lot of prestige tied to it. And it literally attracts a better crop of people, for it's really interesting how all of that works. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on us and it's frankly ridiculous.
Yeah.
It really is.
So to kind of round out our school conversation, what would you say to someone in a situation where school is being pushed on them, but
Hmm.
they honestly feel like it's not the right choice for them? Like either they need a break or, they want to pursue a different career path.
So I think it depends on the context. What are you doing? Like, are you living with your parents and they're like, hey, if you want to live with me, still, you got to do this degree?
Mhm.
Are you living on your own? You're already, have a job, but now it's like, okay, what's the next step? And the employer's like, hey, if you want to progress, you need to have a master's. I have an MBA.
Mhm.
So depending on the context, like if you were living with your parents and that was their thing and you didn't have another source of money, I would evaluate what would it take for you, what's the harm in
Mhm.
doing the school? Because the alternative to that is, right, your parents are telling you, okay, you gotta go make a life for yourself. Okay, and
Right.
maybe that's what you want to do, and that's great. You know, most jobs with the housing market these days don't pay enough to pay rent. So, that's the alternative, which is a sad reality. So you got to just weigh pros and cons. At the end of the day, a lot of school has not hurt anyone. And if it's being pushed on you, if it's being paid for,
I was just going to say that, there's a situation where it's being pushed on you, but your family's going to help pay for it, or like they're pushing on it on you, but they're not contributing financially, right? Like I feel
yeah,
like those are two separate situations
Yeah.
of how you'd handle that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So it's really just looking at the whole picture. If like my parents encouraged my brother to do his master's right out after his undergrad and they were going to pay for it, he didn't want to do it. He's like, I want to go work. And but they were paying for it. He was already in the school system and frankly would have increased his, entry rate, his entry salary. And I remember talking to him saying, dude, I had to pay for my own master's degree and I was working. And let me tell you, that's really hard to do.
Mhm.
So they're offering to pay. There's nothing. You just got to continue studying for 2 years. What do you have to lose? And there was no answer. So when you're, weighing pros and cons, I always just think it as what do I have to lose here if I go a certain way?
Mhm.
What is the unintended consequence of me pursuing this route or not pursuing this route? And does that outweigh the benefit? And so that's where I say it's like to me it's very context specific. Um so is there a specific context you have in mind? Because if you could elaborate, I could give more too. But that's my 2 cents in that context.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It really does depend on the context, and I think it definitely comes down to financials sometimes, and we kind of address that where if they're going to front the money for you, then
Yeah.
really like what's to lose, especially um, if you're just coming out of high school or fresh off your bachelor degree. If it's there for you, it's an opportunity, right, that you don't want to
Yeah.
pass up. I think it's sometimes hard for, like, there's going to be people out there that aren't going to have the financial help,
Yeah.
and but yet everyone's still pushing them to go to school. So there I understand where there could be you
Mhm.
know it's a little bit of like, it's your life, if you have to pay for it, right? So maybe that's when it's not a great decision. And it doesn't mean that you can never go get a degree, or there's so many options now. Like we have online learning capabilities. I've done career specific courses in the past few years for my job, and like that has excelled me more than some
Yeah.
other like university courses, right? Like in terms of
Yeah.
what I'm able to ask for in terms of pay
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and job titles. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many different routes now, and we are living in an age where we really can
Hmm.
explore different things and get to our
Yeah.
destined careers.
Because the other thing I think about in that context is, what does that degree, what does that schooling enable you to do? Does it enable you to pursue what you want to? Does it enable you to get the job you want to get? And if it does, yeah, you got to outweigh, you got to weigh, do I do this now? Do I do it later? Because we talked a little bit about a fallback plan earlier. If I thought about, okay, I want to run my business, and then I said, well, okay, if nothing works out, what would I want to do? And I just started looking at those job descriptions, looking at what people are asking for, you know, look at what they state. So I said a lot of, places will ask for a bachelor's degree. There's certain, you get to a certain point in certain jobs where they're going to ask for a PhD for you to be able to enter even or apply, right? And so you got to look at where do you want to go and what's going to be expected of you, and weigh the benefit of, if I go at an entry level and I don't have this, I could possibly be paid less. And maybe that's okay.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm at a point in my life, it doesn't matter to me to be paid a lot more because I'm single, I don't have any debt, like it doesn't matter. But if
Hmm.
you, have a house, have a car, have like have all these expenses, then what does that schooling enable you to get a lot more of? Um, I'll tell you this. So when I left my job a couple years ago, I was looking for another job. And, there was so much going through my head, like maybe I need to pursue another degree because I want to, go into another field. And I started looking, they were expensive, right? Like school, especially master's degrees, are expensive. Um, and I did a online certificate, to your point, and it was 2 grand versus like these degrees that were like 57 some $1,000. And it was around DEI. That was my diversity, equity, inclusion certificate. And it gave me so much energy, so much insight, so much validation for the things that I'd gone through. And it really gave me a new perspective into what I wanted to do. I'd seen it come up, and because of what I dealt with in my previous workplace, like I was like, yeah, I'm curious to learn about this. And I did it. And then I started interacting with posts on LinkedIn from people who were posting about that specific topic. And actually, the job I have today is because one of my connections saw that I was posting on those things, and that like I was commenting, I was making connections, um and he had heard about his company and now my company like starting a DEI initiative, and he was like, "Hey, I think you'd be a great fit, like you should apply here."
Hmm.
And I would not be here if not for that investment in myself. At the end of the day, like I've stopped looking at things as like dollar amounts. I've started looking as investment in myself. And is this worth
Hmm.
that investment? Does this add value to my life? But I'm at a point where I can have that perspective and that viewpoint. And earlier in my career, I probably wouldn't
Hmm.
because,
No, I think that's an excellent point because Rachel and I can both relate to that. We have our undergrads, right? Like that was our base level, and now as we are, further along in our careers, it's like, okay, here's a course. And like, we talk about it with our employers, and they're like, hey, if you do this course, this is going to take you from here to up here and open these doors for you. And thank God most of them are not as expensive as going to to university. Uh, so yeah, I
that's
love.
curious though. Like, so they're telling you that if you did a course, you would be at a, like you'd be able to move to another position. And are they
Yep,
paying for it?
yep.
Yep.
And they pay
You
for
have
it.
to like pass it, but then they
Yeah,
pay
you have
for
to.
it. It's
Oh,
great.
sure.
But
Yeah. And then, like, and then the question is that what I want to do? Is that position where I want to be? Like, okay, free school is great, but it comes with strings, right? Like they're probably going to ask you to stay for another 2 years. Is that worth your life in that company for another 2 years? And maybe it is. Maybe it's a great place to be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But then like going outside of, just the corporate world here of them wanting for you to progress. Um, for me, that was the whole reason why I ended up in the industry I'm in. I had to pay, I think it was like $1,500, which, it was quite a bit of money just to put out all at once for me at that time. And, that investment in myself changed my whole life. So I
Yeah.
think, and I don't know, I'm a huge supporter of just continuing education, no matter what it is. Like, I know we did a whole episode on this where if it's like professional or personal development,
Mhm.
it's so important that no matter what age you are,
Yeah.
keep learning, keep growing yourself. It could be totally unrelated. Like
Mhm.
I've mentioned on here, I'm a registered equine massage therapist. Like, you know,
I love that.
like,
That's
like,
amazing.
and oh gosh, I mean, there's a list of things that I'm registered for, but it was just because I was just like, you know what, that's cool. Like I
Mhm.
want to add that to my knowledge repertoire, and
That's amazing.
it's always a fallback plan
Yeah.
if I
You know
if
what
it
I
doesn't
want to
work
be?
out.
I want to be a registered officiant, because like
Oh my
maybe there's
gosh.
there was a wedding I could have.
Oh, you know what? How many times in the movies does it happen where like we need a
Exactly.
priest or like we need an officiant and like you're like,
I
I can do
know.
it.
I can
It's
do it.
so funny. I just for that reason I
Yeah.
wanted to do
Just for that
it.
reason, you'll just be ready for that one moment,
Exactly.
right? So yeah, no, I think to round out school here, it's so important just to invest in yourself. And for sure,
Yeah.
like the baseline is make sure you're doing this for you, as hard as it is when you have external pressures on you. At the bottom line, you have to remember it's your life. You need to think about where is this going to take you, and think about what doors you want opened.
Yeah, and kind of springing off of that too, we did mention it a bit earlier, but going back to your pros and cons list, Preeti, I think the world is starting to move away from it. But like we said earlier, at least having a bachelor's degree is like the currency for entering the workforce. And I think that the world's not quite there.
Yeah.
I think we're moving towards it where it's, you choose your own path. And, if you're passionate about something and you're hardworking, you can get into that career. But, like there's positions that would never used to require that where now that's right on their job description list. And it is unfortunate, but that's something that needs to be considered that is the foot in the door. It might not get you as far as it used to, but it opens the door a crack.
Yeah. And sometimes you just have to make money to pay your bills. And that's okay.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's move into relationships and dating.
Mhm.
So I can speak for myself here and maybe for you too, Laura, but the cultural messaging that we grew up with, even though like I personally did not date until university, whether that was my own choice or my brother's scaring any potential romantic affair off, I'm not entirely sure. But it was accepted that usually you start dating and going out like with boys and all of this or girls when you are a teenager. Like you're in high school, okay, this is like the moment where this part of your life starts, quote unquote. But what was the expectation that you grew up with?
That I was going to be arranged married one day. No, there's
Yes.
no expectation of dating. Um, and honestly, in India, again, in the middle class, you do not date. If you're upper class, you've probably lived in other countries. There's things that start to become more acceptable in a different layer of society that is not acceptable in other layers. Because if you're dating, if you're sleeping with multiple men, and then you're damaged goods, and then who would want to marry, like all of that sort of starts to come with that. And my cousin was actually dating somebody. She was like sneakily dating this person, and this person like lived 2 houses down from where they used to live, and somebody found out. It wasn't the parents, it was somebody found out and told the parents, and it was like such a huge thing that that weekend they got her married to him.
Oh my.
And
Yeah,
was this a man that she would care to marry, or was this more just
she
like,
loved him.
okay,
Okay.
It
but
didn't quite last.
yeah,
She's really
Okay.
young, it was like
Mm-hmm.
her
yeah.
first thing. And but that's how it was seen, as like, you don't do that. Like, even growing up, I remember one of my classmates called home, and he wanted to ask about some homework, because I was like the A student and all that. And my parents picked up the phone, right? Landlines, picked up the phone, and
Oh
he
yeah,
said,
landline days.
yeah, like, can I speak to, Preeti? And they let me talk to him. But then later it's like, why did he call home? Who's this boy? Why is he, why can't he call somebody else? I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't know. I didn't ask him to call me. I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, you studied, you didn't date, here, once we came here, even though it was more normalized, like, you dated, you went to prom, you had a date and all of those things, it was still not something my parents wanted to. I can, because I mentioned that in my, moving out episode, but there's this like accountability that they had to people back home. It's this like continued, like, a shadow of a presence of this baggage that they have. And when I started dating my now husband, um, I hid it from my parents because of that, which could have been really bad. It could have ended terribly. What that hiding does is it doesn't allow you to have those conversations around safety, around, oh, maybe we're fighting and like I need a perspective and I don't know. And, it's easy to become isolated. Um, but it was not okay. And honestly, like, how they found out was, we updated our Facebook. Now my Facebook was private. Like, my brother was on my Facebook, but like my parents weren't. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, like, and I updated my Facebook, and my brother had his Facebook open when my parents saw it, but they didn't tell me they saw it.
Oh wow.
They waited to see what would happen. And like, like, we were dating and it was starting to get serious,
Mm-hmm.
where like, now my husband grew up here, right? So he's expecting like, yeah, we should be able to go out on dates, like, we're working, we're making our money, we should be able, and I was like, that's not how it works. Our first date, I told him, he was like, I'll come pick you up at that, and I was like, I'll meet you there, because you can't be seen around my house. And so it's starting to get serious. And I came to my mom, I remember, and I was like, and I had moved companies at this point, but she still worked with him. And I was like, Silas, like, he asked me out, and would it be okay if I go on a date? And she's like, what do you mean? Aren't you guys in a relationship? And I was like,
Oh no. And okay, I need to know
it's
how
like
long in between
busted.
her seeing it on Facebook, and then when you came clean, how long was that?
Oh, that was like maybe a month
Okay.
at
Mm-hmm.
most.
Okay.
But we'd been dating for like 6 months at
Yeah.
that
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, you should have seen, like,
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to, like, go away, like, we wanted to spend some time together. And I had to ask my friend to be like, hey, can you talk to my parents, and like, let's try to like book a trip in front of them, so that we can, so they think I'm going with you. And then like, I told my boyfriend to like meet me at this place. And so I went in his car, and like, it was just so like, it was
Oh my
so
gosh.
ridiculous if you think back to it. And all they needed to do was say, and my mom literally worked with him, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what more of a background check do you need than like, he works in the same company, he's probably gone through the same stuff that I had to get in here. He's probably okay.
Hmm.
He's gone through the same background checks I have. And but they weren't okay. And there was a lot I dealt with. Um all of a sudden I had curfews because now they knew.
Right.
I had to be home by, first of all, there was a lot. They were like, we can't believe it. You're dating a white guy. You're losing your culture, your roots. And you like, I remember my mom saying, you're never going to have a bond with him like you would with an Indian man. And I was like, okay, sounds good. Like, I did not like Indian men. Um, I love my dad, but I've, you know, grown up with a lot of Indian men around me, and I just don't like their mentality. It's very much that the woman's supposed to be submissive. And I used to be friends with a guy who stopped dating somebody once who was a lawyer, and because he was like, she makes more than me. And I asked her, because they were getting serious, and he was like, if we get married, then I would want you to quit your job because I can't have you making more than me. And I was just like, why would I want to marry somebody like that?
Yeah, with that
Um,
like insecurity, really.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, right. There's just a lot of, and there's just this expectation of the woman will do this and the woman will do that. And I'm like, I don't want to marry an Indian guy. Um, there's a lot like, so, yeah, these curfews, and we're trying to deal with it. And at one point, we had been dating for like 3 years, and like he was over at our place because my mom's now getting used to the idea of him being around.
Mhm.
And then
And
the pressure
sorry, how
started
long did that take, Preeti, for your
for it to
parents to
be,
come around and say like, okay, like
yeah.
we're accepting this relationship and
Oh, a while. I
yeah.
think a year
Okay.
to like start to be okay. Like, okay, he can come over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had already met his parents and they loved me, and yeah, it took them a while. But even then, there was always something around. He had girlfriends before. How do you know he's gonna like be with you? Like, he's just gonna dump you and like all of this stuff. And I'm like, you don't know that, And I think what was happening was that because my cousins knew because of Facebook,
Hmm.
which is not something I saw coming,
Yeah.
but because my cousins knew, my aunts and uncles knew, and they were
Mm-hmm.
talking to my parents about, oh, we saw that she's dating XYZ, and he's a white guy. Even before we got married, like the day before our wedding, my aunt approached me and was like, you sure you still want to do this? And like, I was 25 then. If that happened today, I'd be like, you need to leave.
Yeah.
But back then I was just like, yeah, I love him. It's honestly, it's so stupid. Like all of this, it makes me feel really frustrated because people can't see that the other person's happy. It's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not an Indian. Who gives a shit? It's not an Indian person. Like, is that
Yeah.
person happy? That's
Yeah.
all
Are they treating
that
you
should
well?
matter.
You're in love and you need
Yeah,
to build, you
my
want to build a life together and you have
I
the same
Mm-hmm.
know.
dreams and
My
goals.
aunt's like actively trying to set me up with somebody while I'm dating him.
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh.
She's like, "Oh, this guy, like I know you're looking for a job. Like talk to him. He's working in this place. Like maybe he can refer you." I was like, "Okay." Like I called him. But then the conversation started slowly drifting towards, "What do you like to do?" And any free time, and I was just like, "This is weird."
Mm-hmm.
I felt weird because I
Hmm.
was like, this random person shouldn't be asking me these questions.
Right.
And then it clicked in my head. He's Indian.
Hmm.
He's
Mm-hmm.
single. And he's like, because of what he was telling me. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe. And I called my mom and I was like, please don't do that again.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's not respecting me.
Hmm.
And, she was like, well, we're your parents and we know better. And if it wasn't for the pressure from my aunts and uncles, I think it would have been a different story, frankly, because
Hmm.
my mom at one point started loving him. Like
Yeah.
she was like, he's great. Like he's so smart. Like she would call him up for like financial advice.
That's
He's
so
just so
cute.
smart. And she'd be like, Silas, what do you think about this? And like, how do you think, what should we do? Should we buy this car? Like, we're looking for a car. Like she started like really relying on him for like cool things. And one day my aunt came over and my mom was excited for her to meet the person she'd been talking about.
Hmm.
And there was like a hurricane or something that night. And I was like, Mom, I don't want him driving back. It's really bad rains. It's nighttime. It's pouring outside. This is not safe. Can he just stay in the basement? Like, I don't even have to be there, but he can stay in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that's fine. She's like, in fact, if you want, like, that's fine. You can stay in the basement too. And I was like, all right. Well,
Wow.
yeah, except the next day, when he left and, my aunt left, my mom just like, oh my God, she was so upset. And I was like, what happened? She's like, your aunt was telling me that, oh, now you're having her, this, she's a bachelor and there's a single man, and they're not married and they're here together and that's not okay. And it's not, and all of this stuff. So my mom, while she was starting to warm up to the idea of him,
Mhm.
now started like regressing and was like, when are you getting married? If this is who
Mhm.
you want to be with, when are you getting married? And that pressure didn't stop until a while either. I remember visiting home once, and for like 2 hours while I sobbed, my mom was like, he's not going to marry you. You don't have a future together. This is not going to happen. You need to move on. Like, she's like, you need to open your eyes and know that this is, and like, I still can recall that, I was sitting on my bed sobbing because we had started talking about, hey, is this going, are we getting serious? Like, our, marriage and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm actively looking for a ring. And, but for her, that wasn't enough. It was, when is it happening?
Mhm.
When we got engaged, she, I called her and she was like, finally,
Mm.
that was her first thing. And like to date, I'll tell my husband, I'm like, I would love for you to do another proposal for me where I don't have that baggage. Like, I
Yeah.
want to be able to enjoy. And it's like a happy day, but like all of this stuff is going on all
Mhm.
around you. Um, man, it's hard. And I know it was hard for her to defend me with her family. But again, it's one of those things, like, I saw that happening, and there's already things I would do differently with my kids. First of all, having the sex talk,
Yeah.
but also just, it's fine. You want to date, like, let's make sure he's a good guy, and not like, have fun, be safe, and we're not, our biological function is to procreate, right?
Mhm.
And to procreate, you need to be with somebody. And I feel like that's how we're wired. We're wired to be with someone.
Mhm.
Are people happy being by themselves? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But that's a change from how we're wired. And when you grow up in a family like mine, where like you're always surrounded by people, it's hard to be single and be happy. And it took me a while to get there. I know I talk about this in my episode too, but I was happy with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't enough. And that really, really sucked. And like, I've just like, I have this resolve of never putting that kind of pressure on my kids.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, Preeti, you can discuss this if you want, but when it comes to like having that sex talk and just being informed about your safety as a woman, like where did you get this information from? Like, because it really doesn't sound like that was a active conversation that was happening in your home.
No, it was a health class in school where they talked about STDs. And there was literally a banana where, they showed
Oh, Rachel,
rolling
you
down the
talked about
condom.
Yes,
that in our
I
last
did.
episode.
Was it a very limited education that was provided? Because let me tell you, they were just like, banana, condom, man
Yeah.
ejaculates,
Oh my
sex
God.
over.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah. And you don't talk about like, a healthy sex life, right? Where like it is not just about the man's pleasure, right?
No.
But it's funny because
No.
like the information that I'm learning is Baltimore has a lot of syphilis cases. Well, guess where my boyfriend was? He was from Baltimore. So like now in my head, I'm like, oh my God, syphilis. Does he have syphilis? And like I remember like before our first time, we, went to Planned Parenthood and we got tested. Both of us got, even though I hadn't been with any, like we both of us
Mhm.
got tested, and we like gave each other the envelope to open the result, and it was like, oh, okay,
No.
we're all clear. But that's the information you're getting.
Yeah.
Not that nobody should be coaxing you into having sex.
Yeah.
Nobody, should like, here are some things you can do to protect yourself. Like, maybe the man will say, hey, let's not use a condom. Well, here's what will happen if you don't use a condom. You can get pregnant. But also there's, it's, they talk about that, but they don't talk about like, if you want to use a condom and the person doesn't and they're forcing that, that's not okay. That's not a
No.
healthy relationship. because I find that especially when we're young and we're new in a relationship, we will be accepting of a lot more and we'll do a lot more against our comfort because we want to be with that person. We love them. We want to be happy together. We don't want to ruffle the
Yes.
feathers.
Yeah.
And I just wish that conversation would have happened. And so yeah, health class, banana
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah. Good old health class.
Good
This is
old
Yeah.
for all
that
of
good
us.
old banana. Actually, no, mine wasn't a banana. It was a tennis racket.
Oh.
Yeah, it
Oh
was
my
weird.
gosh.
It was a weird, yeah, needless to say, I did not learn very much from that.
Yeah. Well,
But
because also like nobody talks about okay, like TMI, right? But like yeast infections.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't,
Like
to be
go
honest,
pee
I'm
after
still not
sex.
entirely sure what that is. No one's taught me.
That means you
Like,
haven't had one, so that's good.
that's good. Yes. But like, you know what I mean is it's just like that's in kind of sex ed class, they
Yeah.
just really teach you what the basics of sex
Yeah.
works, but they don't teach you anything about like your actual sexual reproductive health. You know, they don't
Yeah.
teach you what a yeast infection is. I don't think they ever told me what a UTI was.
Yeah.
And like the first time you have one of those, it's a pretty scary experience.
You're like, I'm fucking dying. I have kidney failure.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
Well,
was
I mean,
honestly my
you
thought
you
process.
could have kidney failure and they don't
Yes.
tell you that.
Yeah. Yep. And you know, it's um like for me, my body chemistry changed when I started having sex. Like I remember I used to use this like soap, and it was like a Dove soap and it had like microbeads or whatever. It smelled good.
Mhm.
I couldn't use that anymore. Like my body pH changed and I
Mhm.
could not use that. I had to move to sensitive fragrance free stuff the moment I started having sex because that's just how my body responded to it.
Yeah, and we probably have very little research in the scientific world on why,
Why that
right?
happens?
Like
Yeah.
women are so unexplored in terms of like our
Yeah.
sexual health.
Yeah. And you've seen we were actively excluded from trials
Oh yeah.
and car crash, testing and all of that, which is, and, it really tells you how much of you know, we need to carve our path and like
Mhm.
we need to say we should be in these trials.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean, and you can't have a dummy that you call a woman, but then it really is like a man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's not a woman. So it's definitely interesting. But yeah, I'm curious, like, what were your guys' experience? How were you told?
With the sex talk?
Yeah.
Okay, so my mom listens to this show, so she's going to laugh when I say this, but I think I was
Awesome.
probably 13 years old, and I come home one day, and there's just maybe a pile of 2 to 3 books that were just casually placed on my bed for me to read.
I love it so much.
Which, I do, looking back on it, when I saw them there, I was not ready to read it. And I like put them in my closet and I was like, no. So thinking back, thanks, mom. I think it gave me the opportunity to go read it when I was ready. Like when I chose to be ready, as opposed to, okay, sit down, we're going to do this. And then I had a secondary one right when I was about to go into university. And again, this is a lot of like TMI, but whatever. We talk about sex on this show. And it was really good actually, because the conversation was okay, you already know how sex works, but like if you're gonna have an orgasm, this is how it's gonna feel. And that's like the first time I'd even like heard, like I knew it was a possibility, I knew that it was a concept, but no one explained how it felt. They were like, oh, it just feels like good. And I'm like, okay, but so does eating pizza. So
Yeah.
so I think in the end, looking back, I think that I was given enough to know that I should be an active participant in the act. But if with my kids moving forward, like I would want to be like, okay, this is how it works, but also there are things you need to consider. Like when you are with a new partner, do you feel like they're pressuring you to have this first time with them, but they're not really considering your feelings? Because if you are, then I need you to come to me and then don't move forward with that. I think at that time there was still a lot of shame. And I think it was internalized shame myself because for some reason I had it in my head that having sex outside of a relationship was dirty. So I had a lot of internalized shame about coercion and sexual assault and such, that even though like I've had my own experience with it, I kept it to myself for like years. Where with my children moving forward, I want to be like, this is something that can happen and it happens often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not rare.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I'm
not at all.
sorry.
So yeah, my experience with the whole sex talk, very similar to Rachel. You know, my mother bought me a book. I think I was about 11 or 12, though. Still remember the book. It's probably still in my parents' basement.
Love
It's
it.
called That's So Amazing, and it had a
I
bird
think I
and a
had the
bee.
same one.
Do you have the same one, Rachel?
I
It
think
had a
so.
bird and a bee that explained the concept of your body and how babies are made and all that. But one thing I explicitly remember now, like looking back, that was missing is there was no talk of what is a healthy relationship, what is sex and just sex. It didn't
Yeah.
didn't quite, like, it kind of covered that part, but not really to a detail of like how reality is, right? Like it really just stuck to the scientific, you know this is how a baby is made, but it never talked about you know uh, you need to be protected against diseases, and emotionally this is what is involved. I learned that more from my friends
Mm-hmm.
who were having sex, and you just talk about it, and then you'd ask questions and that kind of stuff, but really, like, trial and error
Mm-hmm.
of what is right. And um I was lucky for my first time. Like, I was in a safe situation, and I have no uh regrets about that. But as I've said before, it's not like I was with someone that I loved.
Yeah.
um
Mm-hmm.
it was really just being like, okay, I'm confident in my body, I feel like I'm in a safe situation. Okay, I've pulled the plug on this a lot before because the situation changed.
Mm-hmm.
um but then, for my children, I think I would want to be very just open and transparent about the reality of it. Like, yeah, there's the scientific principles of reproduction, but like, this is this is the gray stuff. Like, Rachel, what you said, if you're feeling pressured or not safe, like, tell me, tell your father. Like, that's what would be important to me over, like, you know putting the banana on the
I know.
condom thing. Like, no, no, let's get away from that, people. Okay. uh we need to be having real conversations of the emotions that are built up, because I feel like there's so many young women who've had sex, and they do regret it because they were not emotionally aware
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
of everything that's involved. And I would hate that for my children.
Yeah, because even with guys, so like if we think about like how if parents aren't talking to them, like how are they getting exposed to it, right? So
Hmm.
friends, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Remember my friend literally once gave me a vibrator and I was like, yeah, I can't take this. Like I live with my mom. She like does my laundry. Sometimes like she's gonna put
She'll
stuff
just
back, like
know. She'll know.
she will know. Um, right. So it's either friends or movies or porn,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And the last of them is the worst of it because there's an expectation you build in your head of how it's supposed to go and what it's supposed to be like. And please don't have sex without lubrication. Like, please, just please don't, like go from back to like things like that. Just yeah, I would want to tell my child all of those and say, look, if you feel like you're ready, like, let's talk. Let's make sure you're safe. Let's figure out the options because I want to make sure you're safe. And, there's no shame in it.
No,
There
no.
really isn't. It is, in fact, like, it's a huge thing. And like anything else in your child's life, like, you should be there for this thing, which is huge. And it's, not like, oh, let's not talk about it, because if we talk about it, maybe then they'll have
They won't
sex.
do it. They
It's
won't
not how
do it
that
if we
works.
don't say anything, right?
Yeah.
Kids find a way, right?
They
Like,
Yeah.
do.
whether they are under your constant supervision at
Yeah.
home, they will find a way,
And it's our hormones. Like we talk about, like,
Yes.
that wiring. It's that
Yes.
wiring that comes out, and like, but I mean, yeah, it's also like media around us, and then you see your friend doing, and then you want, just, you have a chance to have that conversation and kind of control that narrative a little bit, and provide a safe avenue for your child to have these discussions, these healthy discussions. And you should do that. You should be the safe avenue for them. And
Mhm.
that's what I plan on. I mean, like with my kids, and you mentioned, around assault, like even from this age, they're so tiny. Like my daughter's 10 months old. I'm already talking about, like, hey, this is your vagina, like this is your mouth, you start to introduce those terms and the proper terms,
Mhm.
so that they know, these are their private parts, and that means nobody should touch them,
Hmm.
like these are theirs. And you normalize the conversation. If you make it awkward, it's going to be awkward. If you
Yes.
normalize
Yeah.
and you talk about it, like, it's just another thing. And then, your teenager's embarrassed because you're talking about it, but that's fine.
Mhm.
But if you make it such a thing, like same with drinking, like if, oh, you can't drink until you're 21, then it becomes this thing. And then that's how you get DUIs. That's how, like, you get into accidents, because you've made it this like valuable thing,
Mhm.
but you haven't taught them to be responsible with it.
Yeah, like wouldn't you rather want to know that okay, your kid is having a drink, but they are in your basement with your
Yep.
friends.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
Yeah. They're not
You're
driving.
home. You know exactly what's going on versus they're all sneaking off
Yeah.
to some backyard
College
party
Field.
raver
field.
fraternity.
We're
Yeah.
from a small town, so parties happened in fields when we were
Hmm.
growing up and like I don't know whose parents knew what we were doing or
Yeah.
not. Like luckily we're all local kids, so no one drove, but not every situation is like that. And then same with sex. Like wouldn't you want to know that your child is yes, maybe sexually active and maybe you have some feelings about that, but at least you have given them the tools
Hmm.
to be able to make sure that they know that they're safe and know that they can come to you
Hmm.
because that the parents job like we just want to know that they can come to us.
Yeah. All right, let's move into our next question. And that is, what would you say to somebody who wants to start living with their partner, but doesn't want to wait for marriage to make that step, or perhaps they don't want to get married at all?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the first question he asked is, if they want to move in, but they're not yet married, right? And to that, I say, I feel like everyone should do that. You absolutely should.
Absolutely.
You know,
It's a big step for a relationship to
it's a
to
Hmm.
live with
huge
someone that
step.
changes the dynamics
Yeah.
uh,
Yes.
so much.
Living with a person, being with them 24/7, especially right now, like in the
Oh,
pandemic,
Hmm.
where you're literally with them 24/7. If you don't have a chance to figure out if you can do that, if you can tolerate the things, if if you both are compatible that way,
Hmm.
being married shouldn't be the first time you do it, because marriage binds assets. It's harder to get out of that.
yes.
Yes.
And it's easier to explore a relationship while you're not married and you don't have that commitment also to untie, which is, and then you have kids. Like, a lot of people stay in unhappy marriages because of those ties. And so if you can, I would 100% recommend you live with your partner. I did, even though my parents didn't like it. I saw a different life for myself. And that's the reason I moved out, because, especially because I was starting to date and I was getting a lot of pushback. I, mentioned I was getting like so much, just why are you doing this? And, just a lot of questioning of things. And I think fundamentally, it was because I grew up in such a command and control household. I just wanted to break free. Because even when I was starting to work and have my own money, like, my mom asked for my bank account, like my password,
Mm.
because she wanted to see where I was spending it.
Hmm.
And I was just like, no. no, like, I mean, I was living with my mom, but I was like, no, that's my money. Like, I shouldn't have to explain where I'm spending it. If you're concerned that I'm spending it like too loosely, educate me on, hey, if you invest, like it'll grow, or,
Yeah, yeah.
don't spend so much money on XYZ. I'm not giving you my password. And there were like those little struggles in my everyday life where I was just like, I can't live like this.
Mhm.
And I
Well,
Yeah.
don't
and
want to get
it's not a
married.
lesson, right? It's just a
Yeah.
judgment, really. Like I don't know how else
Yeah.
to describe that.
Because I feel like, if I had gone down the arranged marriage route, like how that works is the parents essentially put it out in the community, like,
Mhm.
and eh, they would probably find somebody and like-minded possibly, and maybe they have the same expectations of me, or you know the guy lives with their parents, because again, that's an expectation of Indian sons. I don't want to do that. I don't want to live with somebody. Like, I want to be able to be.
Yeah.
And that, like, daily struggle that I went through, and just this, like, I couldn't do certain things, I couldn't go certain places. Like, I was just not about it anymore. But then
Hmm.
also, because we were getting serious, I wanted to explore that relationship. And I wouldn't have been able to explore it in those 2 hours I could see him, or like before 11, I had to be home. Like, I couldn't hang out with his friends and learn about them and know about
Yeah.
them. This is, the wagon I was hitching my ride to. Like, I didn't have enough information. I just knew, like, all of this has been happening. And I'm like, I got to live on my own.
Really, all of us, you know, we do need that time to just live on our own and figure out who we are. Because I remember, in my early
Mhm.
20s, like those were such pivotal years for me. And like I changed myself all the time. Like I tried on different things and I was just like, okay, is this who I want to be or do I want to be this? And it it wouldn't have been possible
Yeah.
if like I had all these, other influences being like, no, you're this, like you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're a wife. That's it.
It's where you
Mhm.
figure out truly your value system, like your value system, that when you are in your parents' house, your parents' values are your values. And by not having that freedom to stretch your wings and like set your own rules of what is acceptable for
Yeah.
you, for people that are coming in, like boundaries. Let's say boundaries. It doesn't give you that chance to be like,
Mhm.
I was taught this when I was growing up, but if I step back, do I actually believe that, or do I just think I need to believe that?
Yeah. The question of who am I is a question we all ask. But if you have a chance to explore that in your 20s, it's a easier thing to digest than like you are, midlife crisis where you're like, who am I? What is my purpose? And
For sure.
one of the ways you avoid that is you figure that out up front. You explore little things, like, what do I like to eat? What do I like to cook? And Runaway Bride comes to mind, right? Like, whoever she dated, like, that was the type of egg, preparation that she liked.
You just said my favorite movie growing up. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And she was, because he would go around and ask, like, how do you like your eggs? Oh, I like them poached. Oh, I like them over
Yeah.
easy. Same as me,
Yeah.
and she was just like, I hate all of these eggs except for
Yeah.
this, you
Yeah.
know?
But that question of who am I, it has ripple effects, right? Not only is it something that's going to impact you, but we talk about it impact, future generations. It will impact your kids, because if you don't figure out who you are, society will tell you who you are. What's the analogy I used earlier today? If there's a hole, water's going to rush in to try to fill
Mhm.
it. That definition of who you are, who you should be, is constantly changing. You should be stick thin. Oh, now you should have, the JLo butt, right? Beauty standards are one example, but it's also like, be a working woman and take care of your family. Like, the definition of who you are will continue to change. And if you don't know who you are, you lose your mind. That confidence in you stems from within.
Hmm.
And if you don't take the time to figure that out, you're never going to be happy by yourself. Because here's the other thing, we continue to evolve the definition of who we are because we change, right? Like, our circumstances change, we learn things, we evolve. So, having a baseline to evolve from is so important so you don't lose yourself. Because if you allow your partner to tell you who you are, their expectation of view is probably going to stay the same while they continue to evolve, and then they'll leave. So I read a story the other day, like how, so many women have, I think it was on Reddit, this woman supported her husband, her fiance, through medical school. And then once he was a doctor, he left her because she had actually, like put her own career on pause to support him. And he was like, well, I'm a different person now. And so many women commented on that. And I was just like, F that. Like, are you kidding me? Please don't put your career on hold for a man,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because at the end of the day, like if that relationship breaks, which there's nothing stopping from a relationship breaking if that person wants to leave, you have to fall back on yourself and the life that you've built for yourself and the identity you've built for yourself. And that comes from working on yourself and knowing that, but also knowing that, like you said, what's acceptable to you, what's not, those are going to be keys in preventing a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
I don't like it when you talk to me like that because it makes me feel a certain way and I don't like feeling a certain way. That's a very powerful statement, but you have to be able to know that it's okay to say, hey, that's not okay, because you respect yourself. Like, I respect myself and I'm worthy of good things. This is not good. You need to stop it. You can't have those conversations.
Yeah, like and it's just the difference of of knowing, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and if you never take that time to figure out who you are and what's important, like that's just where that cycle continues, and it's going to carry on then to the next generation.
And I'll give you a perfect example. Like I told you, like I grew up with my family. So family's rules, right? And then you go to school, school has its rules and work has its own rules. And when I started dating my now husband, our power dynamic was very different. I was like in love and like this, like the first time I'm in love. And, whatever he kind of said, I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's how the relationship should be. There was a phase in our dating life where I was like, hey, wanna, like, we were I was spending a day or something and I was like, hey, want to go play tennis? And he would say, no. And that was it. And I remember feeling hurt, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to like ruffle the feathers. And I was just like, oh, maybe that's just how relationships are. It took me a while to realize that wasn't okay. And it took me a while to realize that I deserved better.
Yeah.
And if I had moved out, I wouldn't even have had the space to think about it because my family was pressuring me to marry somebody, um, and like he was starting to take me for granted. She's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You see these patterns, and honestly, like human nature is to become comfortable. And the moment you become comfortable, you stop dating the person, you stop doing things for them, and that honeymoon phase dies. And if past that you can't be with that person, the relationship's not going to last, but also you're going to come out crushed. Like you got to stand up for yourself in the moment. And that's true at work too, right? Like
for
you
sure.
got to stand up for
Any
yourself
situation,
in the
any
moment.
situation.
Yeah. Any situation you're in. So if you don't move out, it's fine. Figure out a way to have space to think about the things you want to be. If you can't think about yourself, think about your friend, think about your kids. How would you want their lives to be? And you're most likely can think about like your nephews, nieces, whoever you love. I want you to marry somebody who makes you happy, who like you wake up and you're like, yeah, this is my person. If you're going through a tough time, they're with you. If you're sick, they're like taking care of you. If you can define who you are, you'll notice things around you start to happen in your favor because you have set and created that space for yourself.
For sure. How did the community around you react, and how did that affect your experience?
So my community didn't support me again because it was this whole idea of, you're moving away from your Indian cultural roots. And I mentioned like my parents having an expectation of who I should be because of the accountabilities they had back home. And living alone is not a part of it, especially as a girl. And it was hard. Like my aunts and uncles, I would talk to them, they would have this like undertone of like mocking. I remember like my family friends, or our family friends, they, because their kids saw me move out and then now they wanted to move out, and so I was setting a bad example for them. And I remember one of the moms once asking me, what's it like, in your new apartment? And I was like so happy, and I was talking about everything, and my mom was rolling her eyes about it, because I don't think she saw the value in it. She didn't understand it. I mean, she didn't grow up that way, and she didn't understand why I needed to live by myself. Even though I had said, look, I need to explore this relationship. It's getting serious. I want to learn just how to do things on my own. I was like, I just need to live by myself and be with my thoughts, figure out who I am. I don't know who I am. And she didn't understand it. It was hard. My dad didn't understand it. My brother understood it. He, in fact, loved it because he would then like come over, because I had an apartment in the city. My parents were also worried about my safety. But, I kind of mentioned this earlier too, because they weren't willing to have that conversation with me. I could have been in a really bad situation and I wouldn't go to them because I didn't want to hear, I told you so. It wasn't good. But like time heals all. So my mom came around, and every time I went home, like I started going home on the weekends. Um, every time I went home, my mom would like send like a ton of food back with me, or she would have gone shopping and would send me stuff. And like I would show up to work with like a new shirt or new something on, and my coworkers be like, "Can we go visit your mom?" She eventually came around, because at the end of the day, like our parents love us. I know they do. They don't
They
always
do.
understand.
Yeah, they really do. And the thing is, like, your parents don't want to lose you, but then when
Yeah.
they see you living your life and doing so well, they're like, "Oh my God, like I better think about what my actions are here, or else like I'm just gonna not be in their
Yeah.
life." Right.
Yes.
And I think that's an important lesson for
Yeah.
to do. And I'm not gonna say hope for, because we all
Yeah.
hope for the best, but like, there are sometimes
Yeah.
certain wants that need to be met. And if not, like, out of the nest. But
Yeah.
I love that your parents did come around
Eventually
and
come
you're
around.
like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like we need to be part of this journey, right? Like this is important. I
Yeah.
love that for
And it
you.
was cool because my cousin once came, like my cousin and her aunt were and my aunt were visiting, and she was 23 at the time. My aunt had packed her bag, and she forgot to pack a belt for her, and she, like, my cousin lost it. She was like in tears, and she's like, how could you do that? And that was my favorite belt, and you didn't pack. And like my aunt came to me, I didn't know this was happening, but she came to me later and was like, hey, is there like a store, or what stores are around here? Maybe we could go get a belt. And I was like, yeah, let's go get a belt. And um my mom told me this story later, and she just at one point she talked to my cousin and said, I think you're old enough to pack your own bags.
Yeah.
And but I could see where she was like, she's dating, like I was making money,
Hmm.
I was
She pays for
dating
herself.
I was dating, a guy who was making good money too, right? Like, um, and I was living by myself. I had a car. Meanwhile, my cousin, a couple years younger than me, but she was crying because her mom forgot to pack a belt for her. My parents, it's funny, like my coworkers have told me my parents are so proud of me. My parents have never once told me they're proud of me. That's just not the Indian way of telling. Like, you don't tell that. And it's things like those that I was like, okay, I think they've made their peace with my decision. And I think as parents, if we can just ask the question of, is my child safe? What can I do to make sure they're safe while they explore this thing? That's the best thing you can do for your child, because you have to let them spread their wings. You have to let them try things. You can make sure that's a good experience for them, though. you know
Mhm.
you don't have to make it difficult. At the end of the day, that's what I learned. Like, even at our wedding, I talk about society's expectations. Like, my mom was more worried about what people around me were feeling. I was the bride. It didn't
Yeah.
matter, you know? But that's the society she grew up in. And if
Mhm.
she didn't do those things, these people would go back home and talk about how she didn't do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
And
would become her failure,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
they'd be like, oh, you've forgotten these things
Mhm.
Yeah.
because she stood up for her child and what her child wanted. You
Hmm.
know, she's put in a tough situation from her society too. And that's not okay. Because
Yeah.
actually, my mom is a really cool person. And she's so great. It's funny. Like, she went from like, you have to be conservative to this. And then she would buy me dresses. And I'm like, Mom, this is too short. Like, I can't wear this. Like, what do you, this is maybe a shirt, you know? But like, she evolved with me. And if this society around her wasn't like that, I think we would, I mean, we're close, but I think we would have been a lot closer
Yeah.
Mhm.
if she didn't have like internal struggle of this is my child, but I need to do this because that's just how things need to be.
Right.
And that's, the expectation. So I used to have a better relationship with my dad, but I definitely have a better relationship with my mom now because I think she understands. There's still some
Mhm.
things she doesn't agree with.
But that's just parents in general, right? Like,
Yeah,
we're
you
different
know.
people than our parents, and their job is to just
Yeah.
give us the tools to survive through life,
Yeah.
and then we do with
They love
that
us.
as
At
we
the
may.
core of it, I know they love us.
Yeah.
It's hard to see it in these difficult times. It's really hard to see it, but time really does heal all. And
Mhm.
honestly, if you're safe and you have the money to do it, like do what you want to. Your parents will
Yeah.
come around because they love you. You can't stop your life because your parents will. In fact, you can't stop your life because anyone else will be unhappy. You just can't. Like, even with our kids, like, you know, there's a gentle parenting way, but there's also like psychology around like how you want your kids to grow. And I love this one thing that was if your child's doing something, you don't want them to say, oh, that makes mommy feel sad or that hurts mommy or daddy, you don't want them to do or not do something because of how an external party feels.
Yeah.
Because guess what? That's laying ground for abuse. They're going to walk
Yeah.
right into an abusive situation, right? You tell them why it's right or wrong because of whatever they're doing. You got to isolate it from yourself. And I mean, at the end of the day, they're their own people. They're smart. You've taught them well. Trust that you've taught them well. And if there's anything that you don't want them fighting from somewhere else, you talk about it and get ahead of it. The
Yeah,
more you can get
honestly.
ahead of it,
Honestly.
the more you can control that narrative.
For sure. And that's just such a wonderful outcome for you that your parents did come around and you have like a bond with your mom that she, like she's grown with you. And that's so nice to see. And I feel like we have some listeners that maybe they want to make this decision that's easing their concerns as well. Because, sometimes uh, maybe it's not moving out and maybe it's not a family member, but if they are a like truly loving, supportive presence in your life, maybe it will confuse them for a while, but eventually they'll be like, I see that you are thriving and you are happy. That's what I fundamentally want for you.
Mhm.
And I think your outcome is very inspiring. And, we've kind of interwoven it in here a bit, but you do have two young children. And just looking forward, as they grow up, what are some key messages that you are passing on to them? And what expectations do you have for them, if any?
I think as parents, we all have our expectations of like how we want their lives to be. I think it's just there. So I'm trying to break out of the expectations. I think the traditional expectations, at least, like my expectations of them are that they're kind, that they're respectful of themselves and others. I think then it's a desire, like I want them to pursue whatever they want and know that I will support them with everything I have. Um, I want them to have a happy life, you know, where they are safe, they're healthy, they're surrounded by good people. That's what I want for them. You know, if for them that means they're artists, amazing. Like if for them that means they're a doctor, amazing. You know, if that means they want to take a gap year after high school, let's do it. I will probably travel with you. Like I I think this is also a generational thing. And also because as we look at like climate change, as we look at things like that, like I expect them to, you know, Bonnie Wright, do you know, Go Gently? You know, she wrote a book called Go Gently. It's around like environmental conservatism. Amazing book. And I, you know, using that in a sentence, I would want them to go gently, like care for the earth. This is your home. You know, so those are my expectations. Like I don't expect them to be a lawyer or engineer or doctor or anything like that. I do expect them to be kind, both inwards and outwards. I know it's a very hippie way of thinking. That's what I think my parents would tell me. But
No, but everything you're saying is so important. You know, it's
Mhm.
not
all
do.
that matters.
Yeah.
Who cares like how much money you who cares like how big of a house you live in? If you're
Mhm.
happy in a small cottage in Ireland, baby, that's what I want for you. That's all I want for you is to be happy and
Yeah.
to be around people who love you and care for you.
Yeah.
Also, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go for a small cottage in Ireland right now.
I know, I'm tearing
Wouldn't-
up because like I really do mean that. And a lot of it I
Mhm.
know comes from my own baggage and in a different life that I wish I had for myself. But I really do mean that. Nothing else matters.
Mhm. Yeah, well, you know, Preeta, you're changing the narrative for your life and your children's, right? And that I think is so amazing. We always have such the best conversations whenever you come around. We
So
absolutely love
good.
it. Um, so where can our listeners, I know you've been on here a couple times now, but for any new listeners who haven't heard your other episodes with us, where can they find and follow you?
Yes, I have a podcast. I was describing I'm currently on a little bit of a break, but I do have a podcast. It's called The Empowered Woman Rises. And I believe I've 22 episodes, like including two from the new season.
Mhm.
And I'm on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. I also have an Instagram page, The Empowered Woman Rises, and I have a website where you can check out courses that I offer um, to, you know, help support you in your career journey, because I truly do believe in empowering women and, you know, changing the world to be better for women. And these are some avenues that I do that through.
Well, I think both of us can confidently say that you are 100% achieving that goal. You are incredibly inspiring, and definitely our listeners, if you haven't already, go check out all of the platforms that Preeti has. You're very knowledgeable and you're a wonderful teacher. We've done one of your courses that you have on your website, and you have such an inviting, warm energy. People can learn so many different tidbits from you, like no matter what the conversation is, whether it's work or relationships, and it's amazing. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
So definitely, if you guys want to hear more from Preeti, check out her podcast, The Empower Woman Rises. You can get it on Spotify and such. But also you can check out her earlier episodes with us. The first one was episode 26, Facing Discrimination in the Workplace. And the next episode was episode 37, which was Toxic Relationships and the Lessons that They've Taught Us. So
That was a fun one.
that was
That was great. That is still like one of my favorite episodes. And oh my gosh, the healing that
that was a
happened.
therapy
When
session.
that was an absolute
It really
therapy
was.
session. And Preeti, just to kind of extend on what Rachel said, you know, you yourself, you just bring this energy that, you know, we want to be around, and, you know, we feel safe. Just how you said, you know, you feel safe talking to us. We feel that right back towards you. And, you know, we love, just striking up conversation, whatever crazy thing is happening in our world. And you're always there just to have the facts, lay down what is right and what is wrong. And we absolutely love you for that.
Thank you. Oh, you guys are, it's been a long week, but honestly, like, you're making this like one of the best days I'm having. So thank you.
I like this little love fest that we're having right now.
It's so important. It's so important to compliment each other. It's so important to recognize, each other. We don't do that enough. Or if we do, then we don't like accept it, Like, yeah, let's compliment each other so much more. Let's share the love. Like, it's beautiful and it's so nice.
Absolutely. Rachel, you want to give our
Yes.
little exit spiel?
Yes. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can also leave us a rating on Spotify. We would really love it if you would do that because it really helps out the show. And you can also send us an email. Our email is teawithlaurarachele@gmail.com. And if you want to have more of a conversation about this or anything we've talked about before, that is where you can find us.
And with that, live like tea.
Live like tea.